A wave of resignations and a wholesale revolt of the cabinet have forced the British Prime Minister to step down as the ruling party's leader.
It is clearly now the will of the Parliamentary Conservative Party that there should be a new leader of that party and therefore a new Prime Minister. And I've agreed with Sir Graham Brady, the chairman of our backbench MPs, that the process of choosing that new leader should begin now. And the timetable will be announced next week. And I've today appointed a cabinet to serve as I will.
Boris Johnson was speaking outside of number 10 Downing Street. He said that he tried to persuade his colleagues to change their mind. Johnson expressed regret that his efforts did not work. He said that he will stay on as a caretaker prime minister until a new leader is chosen for the ruling party. But a growing number of his party's members are calling for Johnson's immediate exit. A conservative lawmaker says Johnson is, quote, too toxic. He says that Johnson should be replaced with a new prime minister as soon as possible. The UK Foreign Secretary has also reacted to the resignation, saying that Johnson has made the right decision. The wave of resignations was triggered on Tuesday, inflicting a snowball effect on Johnson's leadership in less than 48 hours. The resigning minister cited Johnson's culture of scandals for their decisions. The leader of Britain's opposition Labour Party has called on Boris Johnson to step down immediately as Prime Minister and not stay on until the Tories choose a successor.
He needs to go. He can't cling on in this way. His own party have finally concluded that he's unfit to be Prime Minister. They can't now inflict him on the country for the next few months. We need a fresh start, and that's why I say changing the person at the top of the Conservative Party.
Keir Starmer said that if the Tory party, in his words, does not get rid of Johnson, then Labour will bring a vote of no confidence against them. Starmer said that changing the person at the helm of the Conservative Party is not enough, that the whole British government needs to change. Meanwhile, Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon has made a blistering attack on the UK Conservative Party and Boris Johnson after the embattled Prime Minister announced his resignation. She says that Johnson should not be allowed to remain in office, even as a caretaker premier.
I think first and foremost there will be an overwhelming and very widespread sense of relief today that Boris Johnson's time as Prime Minister, which should probably never have been allowed to happen in the first place, is coming to an end. I do think it is quite incredible, though, to suggest that he will remain as Prime Minister for another 3 to 4 months. I think the sooner he is out of number 10, and preferably that is today, the better. Look, if there is a general election, which I think would be in the interests of the UK as a whole right now, then I will fight, as leader of the SNP, that election on the basis of, should Scotland be an independent country. That said, I think the reality is there's not going to be an early general election. A new Tory leader, new Prime Minister is obviously going to want time to establish themselves and presumably to repair some of the damage, the very deep damage that Boris Johnson has done to the Conservative Party, although they have allowed him to do that. So yet again, I suspect we're going to see the interests of the Conservative Party take priority over the interests of any part of the UK. So much as I would relish the opportunity of a general election, much as I think many people across the UK would relish the opportunity to kick out this rotten Conservative government, I don't think it is at all likely that we will see an early general election.
From Aberdeenshire in Scotland, Alex Salmond joins us. He's a former First Minister of Scotland. Alex Salmond, welcome. So things move rather quickly in UK politics in a matter of just, I guess, in 24 hours. It seems maybe longer than that based on the scandals. But you tell us how this came about in terms of the way that it came about. Is it really just all about the scandals that happened and just one too many, which forced Johnson to basically be relinquished of his duties?
Yes, that's a good way to express it. It was sort of one scandal too many. It was a cumulative effect of a whole succession of difficulties that Prime Minister Johnson was experiencing. And the common thread through all of them, which involved parties in Downing Street during lockdown, covering up for ministerial colleagues who'd transgressed, the common thread in all of them was that the Downing Street machine and Boris Johnson himself seemed incapable of being straight or telling the truth. And eventually his party joined the rest of the country in being thoroughly fed up. And the last 48 hours have been quite extraordinary in UK politics, with 60 ministerial resignations, eventually forcing the Prime Minister's own resignation this morning.
Looking at an obvious question, to give Prime Minister or former Prime Minister Boris Johnson some credit, what kind of legacy do you think that he is leaving behind, based on the way you see his performance was?
Well, obviously the claim that he'll make is he is the Prime Minister who got Brexit done, which means he took the United Kingdom out of the European Union. Now, of course, for people like me who wanted the UK and Scotland in particular to stay in the European Union, that's no great triumph. It's an absolute disaster. And of course, we feel that very deeply in Scotland, because the nation of Scotland voted by 2-1 to stay in the European Union, but were dragged out against their will. But that would, he would say, be his main achievement. And of course, he won the Conservative Party an 80-seat majority, based in England, of course, at the last election in December 2019. Now, that was a considerable triumph, but even a Prime Minister with a huge majority, he cannot sustain his position if he continues to transgress in the eyes of his party and the public. The one abiding instinct of the United Kingdom Conservative Party, which has prevailed for 200 years or so, has been self-preservation. The one thing they do well is they act to preserve their own seats, their own constituencies. And if they see the Prime Minister as a liability to their own survival, then they get rid of a Prime Minister. They've done it before, and now they've done it again.
All right, we have to mention what, we don't have to, but we have picked this question because Nicola Sturgeon had a lot to say, Scotland's Prime Minister, about Boris Johnson not being allowed, according to the way she sees it, to stay on as Britain's caretaker Prime Minister. Obviously, we know how she feels about Boris Johnson. Why do you think she's making that point? I mean, what are her concerns if, since now, as it is, Boris Johnson is staying on as a caretaker Prime Minister?
Well, now resigned, you'd think, but if controversy so takes over, or whether he should get out, his deputy be the king. I mean, to me, it seems from English Conservative, bad news for Scotland, whether it be successor. So I can't see that it's a huge argument, but nonetheless, that is now the crisis is engulfed. Go now, or whether he should stay on until October. My hunch is he might well manage himself in Downing Street, because constitutionally it's very difficult to remove him without the Conservative Party forcing a general election by refusing to back him in a vote of confidence in the House of Commons. And given that their whole objective is survival, they're unlikely to do that. So I think if Boris Johnson toughs it out, he might well manage to stay in Westminster. But from a Scottish perspective, the real interest is not in which Conservative Party member is in 10 Downing Street as Prime Minister, but whether any Prime Minister in Downing Street is going to recognise Scotland's national rights and the right of Scotland, which they voted for, to have another referendum on independence. It's the future of Scotland that concerns us, and not which occupant of Conservative Party happens to be in Downing Street.
Well, I mean, what do you see in terms of the future then of who may be replacing at this point Boris Johnson that would then favor what you are saying? I mean, do you see that in any of the, well, I mean, it's too early to tell at this point who's going to be running, or the contestants that are going to be obviously running for this. I mean, do you see that in any of them?
They are declaring. They are declaring already, and we've now got 15 people indicating that they want to succeed Boris Johnson, from Rishi Sunak, who is his Chancellor of the Exchequer until 2 days ago when he resigned, to the person he appointed yesterday as Chancellor of the Exchequer, who also wants to run. So there's now a total of 15 horses in the race. I should say that within the ranks of the Conservative Party, the 300 plus MPs they have, there are one or two decent, honourable people. The difficulty is that the Conservative Party has an unerring ability not to choose them. undoubtedly they'll choose someone almost as unsuitable, maybe even more unsuitable than Boris Johnson. They have an unerring ability in the Conservative Party to back the wrong horse as far as the good of the country is concerned.
Well, that doesn't sound too promising, does it? Okay, so if you take a look at the landscape right now, just in terms of the immediate vantage point, what are we looking at? I mean, you had 60 ministers resign. You're having a country that is in the cusp of somewhat of an economic crisis, to say the least, with the rise of the cost of living really plaguing all sectors of the economy. And of course, it's an uncertain future moving forward. Economically speaking, of course, you're looking also at other challenges like the Russian war and what am I missing here? Just the major challenges. I think those are some of them. I mean, what are we looking at until somebody is chosen, which is in October? If it follows that timeline, a lot of things could happen. Do you see this government or the incoming administration of any to be able to handle all of that?
Well, I mean, there is a severe economic crisis. I mean, the inflation is common to many countries just now. It's caused by the nature of the world economy recovering from the pandemic, but also the European war and the Russian invasion of Ukraine is also having a big effect and impact on natural resource and food prices. So that is a huge impact at the present moment. What is different and unique about the UK economy is that not that the prices are rising very quickly, but the economy is growing very slowly. So it's not inflation just that the UK is suffering from, it's what's called stagflation. That's when you have a combination of stagnation in the economy and inflation in the price level. And stagflation is a very difficult place to be economically, because it means that the mass of the people are getting considerably poorer and economic growth is very low and prices are very high.
All right, we had you mention about independence move for Scotland. If you can kindly repeat that stance that you relayed, because of the fact that we did not fully have a great connection with you on that, and we want to make sure how you see that moving forward within the context of what you had explained to us.
Well, I think from a Scottish perspective, the real political battle is not who the successor to Boris Johnson is. It's not the battle for Downing Street. It's the battle for Scotland. If we take what we mentioned there about the economic crisis and the huge pressure on energy prices, I mean, petrol in the UK is now approaching, or even past in some cases, £2 a litre, which is a very high price indeed. And prices are rising across the board by 10%. But Scotland is a country, of course, which has abundant energy resources, not just oil and gas like Iran has, but also huge elements of renewable power, the ability actually to produce in renewables 10 times our electricity requirements. So why on earth, under these circumstances, should the country of Scotland, amid all that energy plenty, have the bulk of our population facing fuel poverty, not be able to heat their homes? Because Scotland is a bit colder than Iran, as you probably know, and in the winter in particular, it can be a bit freezing in Scotland. So that's the dilemma we face: a country of enormous energy plenty with our population in fuel poverty. These are the issues that really matter to people, not the musical chairs and games in Downing Street and Westminster. And therefore, I think the real battle is not for Downing Street. The real battle is how the votes of the Scottish people for self-determination, for independence, for another independence referendum, as to how we can force the Prime Minister, whoever it may be, in Downing Street to accept the democratic wishes of the Scottish people. That's the real battle.
And final question, the relationship between Downing Street and the EU overall, how do you see that? Do you see that whoever is going to come and replace Johnson, that there's going to be a different way, that a rapport is going to be between the two that would be more positive than how it's been between Johnson and the EU?
Well, it couldn't be less positive. I mean, the Conservative Party is now wholesale a Brexit party. That means they are in support by vast majority of leaving and having left the European Union. So whoever's elected will probably be, as the term goes, a Brexiteer, somebody who supports the British exit from the European Union. However, within that term, of course, you can be polite and friendly with your European erstwhile allies, as opposed to being confrontational. And Boris Johnson was very confrontational, most recently about what's called the Irish Protocol, where he was threatening to break international law in order to try and undo negotiations that he agreed to. So I suspect a new Tory Prime Minister, while still being a Brexiteer, while still being hostile to any suggestion of going back into the European Union, might find a way to be a bit more reasonable in terms of the international dealings, because I think although all in the Conservative Party, or the great majority, are in favour of the Brexit, some had been getting very disconcerted about the potential of the UK to break international law and the consequences that would arise with potential trade wars and so on and so forth. So I think the European Union will be rubbing their hands to see the back of Boris Johnson, and they'll be hoping for the best, that somebody will come in who doesn't, if not change policy, then at least will do it in a rather more polite way.
Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it. Alex Hammond, former First Minister of Scotland there, talking to us from Aberdeenshire. Thank you.
A great pleasure.